What do you mean by clear people? I hear the phrase clear the planet.
Right. Hubbard said in Dianetics you have two minds, the analytical mind, which is like a computer, and the reactive mind, which is all your problems, all the things that upset you, physical or mental. And he said with Dianetics alone, you can erase your reactive mind, right? The original Dianetics said you will have a perfect IQ, a perfect memory, no pains or somatics or upsets. It didn't work. Let's just say that. Clear didn't work. His very first clear, he turned around and said, "What's the color of my tie?" And she said, "I can't remember." Now, you have to know Hubbard was a con man, right?
You say Hubbard, you mean L. Ron Hubbard, the science fiction writer who founded Scientology.
Exactly.
And you just called him a con man. Strong words.
Okay, a con, any kind of a con, there's three things that have to happen. Number one, you have to recruit someone into the con or convince them they need whatever it is. You have to get the money, and then you have to make them feel guilty so that they're going to buy more, right? That's how a con pretty much works. That's
such a broad definition of con, though. I mean, that sounds like the salesman at the watch store trying to get me to buy this watch for my mom. I mean...
But a watchman doesn't make you feel guilty afterwards because you didn't do anything else. They say, "Thank you for getting our watch. We'll see you the next time you're around." Guilt is a big part of a con.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor that point, but a lot of marketing has to do with guilt. And what's that old AT&T commercial? Your mom's sitting home alone, waiting for your call, and you don't call her because you don't have the right long distance service. That's why you should get AT&T.
Okay, well, let's not waste our time on it. Let's forget it. I don't care. He was a guy who promised things, and then it turned out they don't work. Let's leave it at that.
Right, I'm with you.
Okay. So L. Ron Hubbard, he wrote the book Dianetics, realized the state of clear didn't really happen, and the people from the point of inquiry are going to understand that because he called it the science of the mind. And in truth, nothing could be farther from the truth. It's so unscientific, it's ridiculous. So what happened then is, if you remember, back in the 50s, 60s, the real opinion leaders of that time were psychiatrists.
Right.
They were certified people that could say, this is ridiculous. So what did Hubbard do? He started his anti-psychiatry campaign, which they're still running to this day, as you hear from Tom Cruise.
And in L.A., there's a kind of anti-psychiatry museum.
Right, but that's the basis of it, because he realized he's got to cut everybody off from them, or they're going to say, it's ridiculous.
So they're anti-science in their views about psychiatry, but the question was, what hooked you? It was basically Dianetics, right?
Dianetics and being able to help other people was my interest. In 1969, I hitchhiked across the country to do Dianetics. I quit college, walked into Scientology. My very first thought, and if you ever read the book Blink, they talk about instincts, right? My very first critical thought was, whoa, I'm getting out of here. I was a hippie. These people were really organized. They were in Navy uniforms. I'd been fighting the war in Vietnam for years, marching and things. They had the big pictures of Hubbard up, who looked like Hitler to me. It was just like, I don't like this.
Well,
right?
What gives? How in the world could you stay if those were your instincts at first?
Okay, but if you read the book Blink, you'll understand people do change their minds. A man hears what he wants to hear, disregards the rest, right? That happens all day long, right? And it's backed up by science in many different things. Read that book. There's all kinds of explanations of people doing such things, like the Getty Museum, where they had a huge statue in there thinking it was from many centuries ago for a year studying it. And finally someone walked in and said, that was never in the ground. It's a phony. Right. They went to the guy who bought it and said, what was your first instinct of this? And he said, it's a phony, right? But then he changed his mind because you want to believe. Do you see what I mean?
Because of social pressures or because of your own desire to believe contra your instincts. Yeah.
Exactly. What happened is I met one of the guys that was a Scientologist, and I said, I don't like that big picture. I don't like the uniforms. I'm anti-organization, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, yeah, me too. That's all a bunch of junk. Don't worry about it. Let's go out and meet the auditors, which are the counselors, right?
Right.
And I told that to the CFI, and they laughed and laughed because it was like the minute my critical thinking skills cut off. I met the auditors, and I remember this day thinking, I don't care what these people believe, I want to be one of them. And that was the beginning. Their whole thing is shut down, shut down, shut down. Cut people off from thinking, reading, understanding. If they knew the facts, they'd walk out.
And you spent 30 years ignoring the facts.
I wouldn't say ignoring them. I'd say I had no clue. I really believed, and they say they're not a faith-based thing, and they're not. But you believe in L. Ron Hubbard, you want it to work. You know what I mean? I was after someone has a great image on one of the websites where it's like this kind of like mule marching along with the carrot out in front, right?
Right.
And that's kind of how the people in Scientology are. They're marching along, hoping they're going to catch that carrot.
So in your 30 years, you didn't just stay a true believer at the lower level. You really worked your way up in the organization.
Oh, absolutely. I was way at the top. They have 8 levels. I was OT 7. OT is for operating Satan, which was Hubbard's word for, whatever. It was his next levels after clear. He had to come up with something to keep people paying. He said, if you want to make money, start a religion. There's
the anecdote about him at the sci-fi, the science fiction writers convention or something, and he tells a colleague, this penny a word stuff doesn't work for me, guys. The real way to make money is found yourself a religion. And a few years later, he founded Scientology. Is that the right story?
That's right. Yeah. Now, they don't know that inside, but that's the truth.
So operating Thetan, we don't need to get into exactly the mythology or the story behind what that is, but you were pretty far up there. You were OT7.
I was OT7, and I was in their top secret gang, right, which was on the Internet and still is to this day, I'm pretty sure, covertly lying about trying to distract free speech off the Internet that had anything that they don't want seen on the net. They're there trying to drive it off the net. Or put down anybody who says anything negative about Scientology.
2 quick questions about your 30 years in the church. Number one, what did it cost you? 30 years working your way up. It's not like you get new titles or new access or, you work your way up because of performance only, but you kind of buy in. You have to pay for it.
You have to pay for it. I did, you can do a thing called co-auditing where you audit me, I audit you, and that's pretty cheap. And I did that on the lower levels. The upper levels you have to buy, and I did for some of it, and then I inherited a bunch of it. My mother-in-law gave my husband and I a huge inheritance that all went to Scientology. She got in Scientology in 1950.
Wow. So about auditing, here's the second question, the exact way that you work your way up. You do this thing called auditing, which is a series of conversations you have with someone else to kind of clean up your communication patterns or something, right?
There's different levels. One of them is communication. There are problems. There's a bunch of different levels of things. And frankly, the lower level things aren't that bad. Although it started out even with me, let's look at that, just right there. I got in 69. By 72, I had joined their C organization. They made me get off my medicine. I started having grand mal seizures. They cut me off from my mom, saying she must be the person that's creating epilepsy.
Because they blame illness on what they call SPs in your life or suppressive persons. Yeah.
You have to be connected to some form of a suppressive person. So then you've got to figure out who in your life is. And I've talked to many families where they were broken up by that very axiom, and that's a very beginning axiom.
Speaking of auditing, what's an e-meter? I guess what we're really talking about is all the pseudoscience in Scientology.
Which is not really science, so pseudo is the correct word.
So e-meters are what you use in auditing.
And they're like a lie detector, which Scientology says it's not. It's a religious device. But the truth is it's very much like a lie detector that doesn't work real good.
And you could buy some of these for like $3,000-$4,000 I saw in a catalog.
Right. They jacked it way up. It used to be hundreds, and then, the more and more they go, the more money they need, so the higher prices they charge.
You talked about their alt-med doctrines, their stance against medical science, against psychiatry. What amazes me is how a rational person is hooked by this. It sounds so unbelievable, yet you believed it.
But see, you are looking at it from, if you were the director of the Truman Show, right? And you'd go, how could Truman believe it? Do you see what I mean?
I see.
But when you're in the show, you don't have access to this conversation we're having, I have never had with one of my 30-year friends or my husband of 27 years. Now, ex-husband, because I left, he stayed in.
You're telling me in all that time you've never had a skeptical conversation with another member of the church? It's
a high crime to speak about Xenu in Scientology. It's a high crime. That means if I don't handle it and, never say it again, they can declare me a suppressive person just for saying the word. And if you're declared a suppressive person, you're disfellowship or excommunicated, you're kicked out, and you never get to say a word again to your loved ones, your family, your social network. Well, their thing is, like their PR said last week to me, Tory can always come back. We always have an open door. But basically, it's like you have to get on your knees, jump through the right hoops, and agree with what they agree or forget it. Right. On the point of how you believed this, even though it was so nonsensical to many people's perspective, isn't that it is mind control. If they study mind control, that's how it works. It's a step-by-step thing. It's a slow train of mind control where you get in, the people are really nice, they call it love bombing, where, you just have tons of people saying, wow, DJ, you're here, fantastic, come on in. Let's face it, it's infectious. It is. For the past year, I've been studying a lot of religions for some research I'm doing for a book. So not because I'm a believer, God knows I'm not, I'm kind of a professional skeptic, but Scientology has been one of these, and talk about love bombing, I